Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Impact and Coffee today. My name is Robert Nelson. I'm the program manager for Pivotal New Mexico, and our co-host, as always, is the lovely Mariah Harrison.
Good morning, everybody.
Mariah, can you tell us where you're actually about your new or your I can't talk today.
Yes,
your new job.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I've recently left the University of New Mexico, and now I'm working in the Mayor Tim Keller's office as the nonprofit and philanthropy coordinator. So I'm happy to continue co-hosting here. Good morning.
So for those who have not been to Impact and Coffee before, it's a welcoming conversation to build community within the nonprofit sector and the broader community as a whole. We do this the first 3 Tuesdays of the month. This is our first Impact and Coffee of July, and within I think the 3.5 months of the pandemic in our series Nonprofit Life in the time of COVID. And so we've just decided to continue this series as we talk with nonprofit organizations and community organizations on what's been happening within their own communities, about what's going on within the pandemic itself. And now we're shifting into so-called, I guess, phase 2, if you want to call it that, and seeing what things are changing. Today is also Gratitude Tuesday. Mariah, is there anything that you're grateful for today or this week?
There's so many things that I'm grateful for right now. A little bit is the opportunity to continue working at home. I think for some of us, that's a bit of a self-care opportunity also. And I'm grateful for really wonderful veterinarians because I'm still working with my animals with some special needs. But those are just some of the very small things for today. How about you, Robert?
Well, I'm grateful that it's not super hot today and that the sun is not blaring down in my house. So because we have a lot of light in our house, which is a good thing, but it's been really hot lately. So good to see a little bit of overcast down here. If there's anything you want to share that you're grateful for for Gratitude Tuesday, please put it in the chat this morning. We have some really great guests today, Adrien Lawyer and Terra Fox and Dani Garcia, all from really great organizations. I also just want to say thank you to our Impact and Coffee team, to Aaron Hilkema, Destiny Logan, Michael Green, Jamie Chester, and Juana Beta, along with Mariah Harrison, our co-host. They help make this happen almost every week now. But we do this, like I said before, every first 3 weeks of the month. At 9 a.m. Typically, we've done this at the Albuquerque Community Foundation, but now with the, obviously that thing that's going on now, we moved to virtual. So, but it's so great because we've been able to connect with so many more people outside of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County and Santa Fe. So we are really grateful to have these sessions. Mariah, is there anything you wanted to add before you jump into our introductions?
So for those of you that are maybe new to our virtual, we always encourage you to continue typing in the chat, either your questions or resources, comments, and also if you have something, that you're grateful for, continue our Gratitude Tuesday conversation, but more than just myself and Robert and our volunteers. And also if you have community announcements, we always provide time for that in our typical in-person days. And so feel free to type that in. So utilize the chat. And then also Destiny will be managing that to see if there are questions that we can interject into our existing list of questions for our panelists. So feel free to utilize that there. And I think that's about it. We sort of roll with the punches during the hour, and we have 3 incredible panelists. So I don't even know that we'll get to all of our questions today, but let's see what happens. And thank you for being here.
Well, without further ado, we'll jump into introductions. And so why don't we start to my left on the screen, Adrien Lawyer. Would you mind telling us in 2 minutes or 2 to 3 minutes a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Yeah, hi, my name's Adrien Lawyer. I use he pronouns, and I'm the co-director at the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. So we are a nonprofit organization. I know all of us on the call probably have a lot of thoughts about nonprofit structure and how it works and doesn't work. But for us, that seemed like the best thing when we organized our agency in 2008. So we've been around for more than 10 years. We're a statewide organization, and we do direct service work, which means if you know a trans person who needs some kind of help, you should refer them to us. because we can almost always find some way to plug in and help folks. Even if we don't have exactly what they want, we have other things that could also support them and help them. So definitely send folks our way if they need any kind of help. We also do advocacy work, which can include policy, helping to write or review trans policy, and also legislative advocacy. We helped to change the law in New Mexico last year around how you update the gender on your birth certificate here in New Mexico. So that was a really exciting thing. And then we do a ton of education. So we typically are training non-trans people about trans people to really improve safety and access for trans people. And we train every different possible type of group. So if your group wants to take our Transgender 101 training, we would love to bring it to you. And all you need to do is get in touch with me and we'll facilitate it. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat window right now, so that if anybody wants to call, text, or email me for any reason after today, please don't hesitate to reach out and do that.
Thanks, Adrien. Next up, we'll go to Terra, who is right next to me on my right.
Hi, my name is Terra Fox. I use she pronouns. I am the Teen Empower Coordinator at Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains. I'm working out of our location called The Space. A lot of people know us as mPower or NMpower, but we've recently rebranded that location to be a little bit more open and swank and inclusive and posh. We're remodeling over there. It's really fun. So when we can finally open the space up again, it's going to be really exciting to come visit us. I was formerly the PrEP specialist. I was focused on PrEP and HIV prevention, getting people on PrEP, getting people tested. We offer several different services over at The Space. We have our mPower programs. There's an adult and a youth program. We focus on HIV prevention and education, and also just kind of forming a sense of community for people in a place where they can feel accepted and safe. My focus is with the teens. So we have any LGBTQIA or allies that are 18, from 13 to 18, they can come join us. And we have all kinds of fun. Sometimes we watch movies, we talk about issues that affect youth. We do events. One of our biggest events we've done in the past is our Lavender Prom, which is an alternative prom for youth that don't feel safe or accepted or don't want to go to their traditional school's prom for whatever reason. And that one's been really successful. Unfortunately, we had to cancel this year because of COVID, but we're looking forward to doing a lot more fun things. The other big thing we do at The Space is HIV testing and PrEP. And we are still open for that. It's still an essential service. So people can still come in and get tested from noon to 8, Monday through Thursday. And that's it.
Thank you, Tara. I really appreciate it. And next up, last certainly but not least, is Dani Garcia over at Casa. Good morning, Dani.
Good morning. My name is Dani Garcia. I am the Outreach Coordinator and Aftercare Case Manager at Casa. So Casa is a group home for LGBTQ youth, 14 to 17-year-olds, that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And the risk of homelessness part is really important to us because sometimes programs are like a person needs to be living on the streets to be considered homeless. That's not it for us. So it's really any unsafe situation, any kind of maybe they're couch surfing, shelter hopping, any kind of situation, we'll take it. And we kind of put that under the umbrella of risk of homelessness. Like I said, we have an aftercare program, which we realized there was a great need for. So a young person is on our program for 3 to 12 months, really depending on what they need, and then they go out in the world and they don't have any supports. So we kind of created an aftercare program that's 8 months long, and I follow them to wherever they are, whether that's getting adopted, their own apartment, a different TLP program, any kind of thing, we really follow them. And also a new outreach program, which I also do, which, things like this, or going into APS, doing presentations, really connecting with our community. And then we now also have a case management program for in-house. So each individual, each resident has their own case manager that helps them with school, with getting a job, whatever that is. We really focus on housing, right? That's our primary focus, but also getting networks for all of our residents, really, because it really takes a village to create this greatness in these residents. So our main job is housing, but also really connecting them to community and other resources.
Thanks, Dani, and thanks for all that wonderful work. It's so important, especially housing. Housing is such a tough sector to work in. So we're just going to go ahead and dive in. Our first question is, we know this has been a really challenging time the last 3.5 months. What challenges has your organization faced in the last 3 months in terms of just your organization, your operations, or even your programs, or even your communities? So we'll just start with Adrien, if you could go there.
Sorry, the mute thing. I'm like the penguins of Madagascar this morning with the Zoom. The interesting thing is that we serve, transgender people are every different kind of people. So it's not like there's only one kind of transgender people, right? Like transgender people are housed and unhoused. Trans people have educational attainment and don't have educational attainment. Trans people live in poverty, and trans people are middle class and upper middle class. So we try to provide services for everybody as much as we possibly can. And what we know about trans folks is that we are disproportionately affected by the disparities in our dominant culture, right? So when you think about the proportion of the population that is trans, and you look at the proportion of the trans population that lives in poverty, it doesn't match the general population. There are more trans people who are not housed, who are living in poverty, who are experiencing horrible employment discrimination or unable to obtain legal work. So we have more folks working in survival economies, more people having to deal with severe resource insecurity. So at our drop-in center here in town, that's typically what we're trying to take on, is providing services to our trans family that are dealing with the worst kind of survival challenges. And what we have found is, no matter what happens, the folks at the drop-in center are always dealing with the same things. So it's it's kind of this horrible answer, like COVID doesn't change it that much because our folks are already dealing with these very severe challenges, right? It exacerbates certain things, like trans folks who live on the street are already having an incredibly difficult time, if they are even able at all, to find a safe bathroom that they can use, right? Many people who are not housed or not allowed to use public bathrooms, or public accommodations in places like a McDonald's or a gas station already, because there's so much discrimination against folks who somehow appear that they are not housed. If you're trans on top of that, then you're never going to get into a bathroom, right? Because trans people who are housed and employed get policed out of the bathrooms by other people in a restaurant or a gas station, get told they can't use the bathroom. So you can only imagine how much worse that gets when, when you also don't have a place to live, right? You may not have access to running water and soap and things like that. So at our drop-in center, it just has seemed really critical that we stay open, because that is the place where people can wash their hands. They can go to the bathroom. They can just rest. They don't have to be looking over their shoulder all the time to see who's coming up behind them to harm them or to tell them that they're not allowed to be there. And a lot of our folks are dealing with major food insecurity as well. And one of the services that we provide at the drop-in is a hot meal every day that we're open. And we know that for some folks, that's their only food of the day. So what we have found is that in the most affected portion of the trans population, this hasn't really been the conversation. It's still the same things that people have been struggling with all along. When we start to move up the kind of survival needs being met ladder, what we have seen is that some folks have not been able to get their trans-related surgeries because of the medical crisis that's going on. Some people have had some holdups around civil proceedings in courts, name changes and things like that can be really crucial for trans folks in terms of trying to create a good life for ourselves, have been delayed or sort of bogged down a little bit by the pandemic and what that's, all of the kind of ripples of that. So we have seen this affect trans people in some way, but I would say our most affected trans people were already so deeply impacted by the circumstances of, trans discrimination and violence that this really wasn't, It was much more a concern for our organization, but how we were going to handle this than it was for our population.
Thanks, Adrien. That's a very good point. I think, it's like any community. I think it's just exacerbated a lot of the conditions that we've had to face in a lot of different communities out there. So thank you for lifting that up. Terra, could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges mPower has faced?
Yeah, we've had kind of two major challenges to what we do with our programs. The first one is a sense of community. Since we're not able to have in-person meetings and groups and events, it's really affected a lot of our participants, because with the LGBTQ community, a lot of us don't have the same sort of connection to family and community, so we have to build it ourselves. And we find that through community organizations like mPower and TGRC. We find it through even places like restaurants and bars and drag shows and all kinds of places that right now are mostly shut down. So for a lot of our participants, they're really struggling not being able to see us regularly and see their friends regularly and have a place where they feel safe and they feel accepted and they can just be themselves. For the adults, it's been a little easier for them because they're more in touch with each other and able to make decisions on their own and go and do what they want to do and have community in which way they can safely. But for the teens, it's a little more difficult because for some of them, their parents might not be very accepting. And even some of them that have accepting parents, they might not be fully on board with them spending a lot of time with their friends or being on all these Zoom calls, talking loudly about their LGBTQ life because they might not be that accepting. And that's one of the biggest problems we've run into, where we would have sometimes a dozen teens at our space having a great time being loud, being themselves. Some of our online events only have 1 or 2 kids. And there's a couple reasons there. There's the lack of community, but there's also some of our teens are essential workers. Some of them have all kinds of family responsibilities now that they might not have had before when they were busy with school. And now that school's out, there's just a huge shift, and there's a lot of fear and worry for our whole community. And we see it with the teens, with the adults, with community leaders. We see it in our bars and things that might not reopen. So there's a lot of fear. But I'm glad that we're still here and we're still offering these services, and we're still, pushing to have some sense of community. And that, I think, is a testament to the strength of the LGBTQ community and our resilience overall, that we still had a safe, socially distanced Pride. Shout out to Bunny for organizing that. She's such a hero in our community. We still have some outdoor events and things that are safe, and we still have online events like this and like what we're doing with Teen Empower and what I've seen many other organizations rise up and do in this time. So that's something that makes me proud and hopeful. The other big thing is stigma, and that one really affects our HIV testing program. A lot of people who might not have felt as much stigma around HIV in the past now have a new stigma around hooking up during the times of COVID. They feel like they may be judged for needing a test because that means they may have broken a quarantine or curfew or whatever they feel is going on. And there's a lot of judgments around people who are hooking up right now. And there is a risk, but there's also a sense of harm reduction in how we view this. We don't want to be abstinence only and tell people the only way you can be safe right now is to not see anybody, and because that's detrimental to mental health as well. So we need to find that balance and that middle ground where we make people feel safe to still come and get tested and to talk about sexual health and not put those things on the back burner. And that goes the same for all healthcare right now. People are scared to go to the doctor if they're having some other kind of health concern because of COVID. And we still do need to take our health seriously and be willing to talk about it and not be afraid, even though this is going on. So that takes all of us to have that sense of breaking down that stigma and supporting each other.
Thanks, Terra. And I appreciate that last point too. That is it's something I get to learn about, and that's amazing stuff. So I appreciate that y'all are continuing that work. Dani, what challenges have y'all faced?
Yeah, well, I mean, so many challenges, and especially with our residents and their mental health, right? Because we have to be so careful because we focus in housing. So if anybody gets sick and we close down, where are all these residents going to go? So we've had to be extra safe and not allowed a guest for a while, and the only people they got to see was staff, and that's just like not a fun time when they can't see their family or their partners or their friends. That's just a really hard time, and especially if we're dealing with mental health issues, dealing with sobriety, especially sobriety, right? A lot of their plans is based on keeping busy, going to school, going to work. So now just like sitting at home with their own thoughts, that's just, you know, our young people are struggling, not only in the house, but also aftercare, you know. A lot of laws that were passed, or a lot of bills that were passed to help people stay in their housing didn't help our residents, because some of them in our aftercare are under 18, so they don't have their own apartment, so their roommates kick them out, their partners kick them out. So then we actually had a spike in homelessness again with our aftercare, which hadn't happened since we started the program. So that was a lot to deal with. We also had a couple runaways from our shelter, which again does not happen very often. I've worked at Casa for a little over 2 years, and we had more runaways in this short amount of time than I've ever experienced with them. So that was really heartbreaking, and just people are struggling, especially with the social aspect of it, and also with getting referrals and bringing people in was heartbreaking, because of course we're in lockdown, right? So that means that they don't get to see their friends and don't see people that they know. So there were some situations where the young person decided to stay in their abusive situation because it was something they knew. It was familiar, instead of coming to a shelter, or staying at a like 30-day shelter like New Day, instead of coming to a group home where it was longer, because they had their friends there, you know. They knew their people there. They didn't know us, and that's so understandable that they don't want to come around to somewhere they don't know, to adult people that don't know their stories, can't experience that with them. So we were hit pretty hard in that aspect. And of course, the other parts of it, of we can't have drag queen bingo and fundraisers, or, you know, other types of outreach that we had in our community. So we were actually hit pretty hard.
Thanks, Dani, for that. I really appreciate it. I'm going to kick it over to Mariah to ask our next question.
Thank you, Robert. So the next piece of this conversation is around partnerships. We're interested in how you're addressing those challenges with other organizations, if you have ideas, if you have needs. So Adrien, go ahead and start with you, if you would. Over the past couple of months, have you seen new partnerships arise to address your challenges, or do you have existing things that have been really successful?
I mean, it's been an interesting thing to us that, you know, we have tried to seek funding from foundations and groups that we felt we could really collaborate with, and not be in a weird, you know, like this is one more of these nonprofit sector things where funding has all of this dynamic to it, and, you know, there's all of this sort of like traditional way of thinking about it. And what we have found is that the funders that we work with over the years have just almost every one of them been totally amazing in all of this, and have stepped forward to be really good partners to us in the middle of this horrible crisis. You know, that we had some very specific funding for our syringe exchange program from AIDS United, and they proactively reached out to say, do we need to convert that into general operating funding? You know, we've had a lot of our funders just, you know, be the ones to step toward us, instead of making us have to think about them while we were in the middle of all of this too, trying to figure out how to do the drop-in center in a way that was safest for our staff. You know, all these things that were on our minds, having to close our thrift store that we'd opened 2 years ago. We had all this stuff going on. And I found that our funders were actually really good partners to us and took the lead instead of asking us to take the lead and approach them and say what wasn't going to go the way we thought, they knew that already and came and wanted to initiate conversations. So it was really fascinating to me. For a few weeks, I was having a lot of phone calls with our funders that they asked for, just to find out how they could best help us and work with us and be flexible. In terms of partnerships here in the state and in the city, I mean, we've been around for 12 years. So we started with just literally nothing, so our approach from the very first day was about collaborating and partnering with other groups that are doing so much of the work that we're doing, because we knew we couldn't possibly do it on our own. We didn't have $5. We really didn't have anything. So we reached out and just started working, with, the HIV prevention and services community, the harm reduction community and contractors, the Department of Health. We've been working with these folks for a long, long time. And I think that really, if anything, it's the length of those relationships, the depth of those relationships that's come into play here more than trying to forge new relationships for us. We've been just trying to make sure that we can do the things we already do more than start new programs or start new, pilot new things. But we work, we have so many, Casa, Planned Parenthood, mPower. Over the years, Equality New Mexico has been a really big partner of ours, especially in terms of legislative things that we've done. There's so many groups that we already work closely with that we've just found that this is really exposed the strength of the relationships and partnerships that we have cultivated for such a long time.
That's a really positive answer. I love hearing that. And I love hearing that the funders are taking the initiative too. You don't hear that very often. So maybe this is also a statement to the types of funders that you're working with. Terra, I'd love to hear from you about new partnerships or ideas about this. What are you experiencing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our biggest partnership and our primary funder is the State Department of Health, the New Mexico Department of Health. And I can't say enough good things about them and how wonderful they are. I'm really proud to be in a state that takes our health seriously, and that's for our entire community. I just think it's incredible. And they have been a wonderful partner through all of this. And I'm really also proud of my colleague, Josh Garcia, aka Celia de Leon. He has been doing a lot of volunteer work over there at the Department of Health, doing extra testing and helping out in this time. So I'm just so proud of him. He's amazing. And the other partnership I'm really proud of, it was just a small thing, but we were able to donate a large number of snacks and food to Albuquerque Mutual Aid. If anyone doesn't know what Albuquerque Mutual Aid is, it's a community-led effort to distribute food, sanitary goods, all kinds of necessities to people who are in need. And they've helped over 11,000 families here in the Albuquerque and the greater area. And if you want to help them out, their website is ffl.org/mutual aid. That was my favorite thing that we've done in this whole thing. It was just, here's some food for y'all, but I'm proud of that one as well.
It's a good example of when you're able to give back, you give back directly to the community that you're surrounded by. I think that mutual aid recently has hit some road bumps, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later. But I think that's a really specific organization we all should be learning more about right now. And so thank you for that, Terra. And kudos to the New Mexico Department of Health for being steadfast. Dani, how about you? What's going on over at Casa?
Yeah, especially our organizational sharing has been amazing. So these different partnerships, and we're a baby organization, we've been around for 5 years, which in nonprofit world is not very long at all. But the way that everybody came together to kind of help us in, different organizations gave us masks, hand sanitizer, food, so many things were just given to us. Even U21 gave us $40 Smith gift cards for our aftercare program. And so we got to share back. We started getting donations back from other partnerships and other people that just drop off donations for us. So we got to share some of that back. We have a bunch of clothes. So Adrien and Terra, if you guys need clothes or anybody else, like please reach out to Casa Q. We get like 5 to 10 bags of clothes a week. So we've been giving that out to shelters. I know your thrift shop and TGRC also get some clothes. But I think just so much sharing has been, and like that community coming together has been like such an amazing thing to experience and to watch. Yeah, it's just been like so incredible how people really come together.
It's almost like there's so many examples you don't really know where to start. So thank you for that, Dani. And also thank you for the note about being able to donate back. If you, Terra, if you would you type in that website into the chat? And if you have any other ideas, feel free to use that. And so I'm going to go ahead and send this back over to Robert for our next question.
Thanks, Mariah. I really appreciate that. So our next question is a compound question. There are like 3 questions within one. So we're going to take our time with it. It's, we've seen some funders step up and provide some emergency funding to a lot of organizations. And on a broader note too, funding for the LGBTQ community is pretty slim. According to a study by the D5 Coalition in 2015, $0 in global philanthropy went to the LGBTQ community or LGBTQ-led organizations. 5 years later, it's still less than 1% of global philanthropy, which is pretty sad. I'm glad that some of our funders locally have stepped up. But our questions are, have you applied for any of the emergency relief funding or the federal dollars like PPP or SBA? That's the first question. What has your experience been like if you have applied for those funds? And then the last question is, how can our funders be more responsive to your organization and your community's needs? And we'll just start off with Adrien, because I know you talked a little bit about that earlier.
Yeah, in terms of like COVID specific funding, we've applied for a lot of things that have come across my desk. That's sort of my approach, is just to apply. It's like, it's like actors say, you're going to get so many no's for every yes, so you might as well just put those applications in. It's like, what are you going to do? Let them decide if you're not the right fit, or if they don't have enough to go around. I was really honored and excited to be part of the grant making team at AIDS United's Syringe Access Fund this year. I went and got to review the proposals. So it was the very first time as a director that I had gotten to see the other side of how money gets given out by a funder, especially a funder that we love and work with and have so much respect for. So it's really fascinating. It really helped me to just think differently about putting these applications in the first place, and to really, really, really not take it personally when you get declined. Like, we had all good proposals for that fund, and we had this much money, and we couldn't fund everybody, and that was it. It was this brutal, agonizing thing about having to figure out how we were going to divide up that pot of money among all deserving applicants. So it helped me to see that you can be the exact right fit. Your proposal can be brilliantly written, and you can still not get the grant. And that was really helpful, I think. I think it's hard not to take it personally when you're the one writing the proposals. So it was good. It's good to know that, I think. So with COVID, that just really, I still am thinking about that experience from last fall, and just remembering that it's good to put the applications in and let them decide how they decide. And so ours has been kind of a mixed experience. We've gotten some of those funds, other ones we've been turned down for. We've been, I think, treated well in all the different processes, but we have gotten or not gotten different ones depending on all different factors that I don't think you even get to know. We also applied for the PPP and got that, but the main reason we did that was to try to keep the thrift store afloat and be able to reopen the thrift store when things could reopen, because our funding for all of our sort of direct programming was intact. So all of our folks that work at the drop-in center were able to continue to get paid. We missed our annual gala, much like Casa Q. We have a lot of fundraisers and things that are very much in person. So we've lost out on some revenue. But a lot of the things that we work under are contracts, like with the health department, much like Terra and mPower. We do HIV testing as a a contract deliverable, and we have money coming in from the Crime Victims Reparations Commission that still is needed in this time. So a lot of our funding that pays our core staff was pretty safe. It was pretty protected. But we wanted to make sure that we could reopen that store because of what the store has meant for the center, and I think for the community in terms of creating jobs, creating job training opportunities, and creating money for our programs. So for us, the PPP was really just to ensure that we could continue to keep the thrift store employees on, almost all of whom are trans or non-binary, or members of the community, and to be able to reopen the store, which it now has been open for the last month and is doing really well. But as we know, with the pandemic taking whatever course, and who among us can predict it, the store got to reopen, but it also might have to close again for some amount of time and reopen again later, and So we're just trying to make sure that we don't lose that arm of what we're doing during this crisis, if we're able to keep that intact.
Thanks for that, Adrien. I didn't know that it seems like it's very up and down in terms of how the store is going to open. So I appreciate you lifting it up. Terra, could you take a stab at our compound question?
Yeah. I think, like I said, our funding really comes from the Department of Health, but they have been wonderful as far as switching around some minor things about how our contract works, because we're no longer able to have all our meetings in person. And so we had to do a little bit of a structural change and a little bit of change in just how we're doing our deliverables. But we're really grateful that they were able to work with us, and we're working everything out and still providing all of our services. Our other funding comes through Planned Parenthood. We're a large organization, and that comes from all the money that comes in through that, from large donors to individual donors just giving $5 here and there. And that's something that people might not realize, that we are still a part of Planned Parenthood, and this is a service that Planned Parenthood is offering. It's a space specifically for LGBTQ youth and adults. It's all we do. It's HIV prevention and helping our community. So anytime you donate to Planned Parenthood, part of that does come and help us. But I think as far as the navigating and applying for COVID relief, we haven't done that as an organization, as far as I know, but we as individuals in the mPower group have helped our participants to apply for some of the emergency funding, for employment, for all kinds of things that they might not have as easy access to understanding or working through or having the internet. So we've been in touch with a lot of our participants and anyone who's been struggling to understand this stuff. It's something we offer. We're not just teaching our community about HIV and stuff. We're helping in any aspect of life when people come to us with any problem. And it's because they trust us. We're their community, and we've helped them in the past. It's harder to just call some random unemployment office number and get help when you can just come talk to one of us, and we'll be like, oh yeah, this is how you do it. And so that's something that we've been doing with that as far as emergency relief.
Thank you. And it's been, I know filling out some of those unemployment forms are really difficult, so thank you for doing that. Oh my gosh. Dani, could you talk a little bit more about any of the emergency funding y'all might have applied for, what your experiences have been, and any suggestions on how a funder could be more responsive for y'all's community and your organization?
Yeah, so we actually did apply for the paycheck protection, and luckily we have kept 98% of our staff, which is during this pandemic, which is great. But our main focus has been in aftercare. All of the clients that have now aged out of Casa Q or transitioned onto Casa Q, because at the beginning of COVID, we had about 3 homeless residents or 3 homeless clients. And so we started a campaign to fix that, So we luckily were able to gather enough for an apartment. So we have our very first Casa Q apartment, which, was something new and trying to still figure out how to do that. We've never had a TLP focus, a transitional living focus at all. It's always just been the one house. So now we have a house and an apartment, and also a rent assistance. So as some of us are aware, the courts now reopen, which means that landlords can now apply for eviction of the people renting that have not paid rent. So we actually have gotten notices for some of the aftercare clients already. And we are doing another campaign of trying to just help pay rent, pay the fees, the late fees, the missed rents, all of that stuff, really. So that's been our main focus.
Thanks, Dani. I really appreciate that. I'm going to kick it over to Mariah for our fourth question.
Thank you. And so we're going to get back just a minute to what some of you have already said about how the pandemic is exacerbating an already marginalized population and already difficult to reach resources. And so this question is about sort of honing in on some of those inequities in our community that this pandemic has been revelatory to some for. So our question is, what changes would you like to see in the community moving forward, specifically around supporting your population and the direct effects that they're feeling from the pandemic, but on a regular basis? So I don't like Adrien was saying, not much has changed. It's just a little bit worse for everybody around. So our question to you, Adrien, will go first, is what changes would you like to see in the community moving forward in relative to how the inequities have been exposed? And what would you advocate for also most strongly for policymakers in our state to accomplish these changes?
I mean, for me, from the beginning, this has been like major systemic societal change. You know, like we definitely have legislative goals here in New Mexico, like the birth certificate law. We'd like to approach in 2021. We'd like to come at sort of streamlining and modernizing name change statute, right? Like there's no reason for people to have to put their intent to publish their name in a newspaper. And right now the law in New Mexico is it made sense back in the day, right? That was the only way your creditors could see that you were trying to change your name to get out of your debt. But trans people aren't changing their names to get out of a debt, you know? Like we still have the same social security numbers and all of that stuff. So it's not really like somebody needs to show up in court and say, I object to your name change, you know? But what that creates now is an eternal record on the internet of the ad you had to put in the paper announcing your name change. So for us, there's like really small things for small, you know, it's not small for us, right? But there's things that seem really granular, like we need to change the way you change your name, right? And then there's the much bigger things that we see bubbling up, you know, as long as I've been alive, as long as I've been doing activist work, which is horrible racial inequity and violence and discrimination against all different groups of people in our country. I mean, not one bit of this is new. This has been going on forever in the United States. We are being given a really like brilliant opportunity to think about what kind of a country we want to be, what kind of a society we want to be. And this, you know, I have some hope in me that we won't let this moment pass as a society, and that we will look at the things that have never worked in the United States, right? Like the income disparity stuff, the educational disparity stuff, the health disparity stuff. You know, I think we really have to take a long look at policies that have seemed far-fetched before, but that other developed countries have implemented, right? We need to look at the viability of things like universal basic income in the United States to keep people from being in these situations in the first place. You know, we need to look at how we reform the criminal legal system. I don't want to use the word reform, right? But tear down and rebuild the criminal legal system, because we can all plainly see that what we're doing isn't working and isn't serving to keep us any safer. And yet we kind of just keep refusing to turn away from it, right? We have entrenched money and power around some of these things that make it really hard to affect real change. So my hope for trans people is my hope for all the people, right? In the trans communities as activists, what we see is, you know, not to belabor it, I know we've all heard so much about intersectionality in the last 2-3 years, but that really is the heart of it, right? When you look at the biggest data set on trans people that's available in the United States right now, it's called the U.S. Transgender Survey. And 28,000 of us took that survey in 2015 when they did it. So it is the biggest, most statistically meaningful set of data we have on trans lives, adult trans lives in the US right now, right? And what it showed so clearly was that trans women have worse outcomes than trans men, right? Because we live in a sexist, misogynistic society. Trans folks of color had way worse outcomes than white trans people. And it doesn't mean that white transgender men like me don't have problems. What we see from the data is that trans men actually die by suicide at the highest rate within the trans communities. But trans women are vastly more likely to be attacked by a stranger, up to and including being murdered. So when we think about societal discrimination and violence, it is not evenly distributed among trans people. And what we see, and we've seen it in the news again and always, is that Black transgender women, here in New Mexico, Native transgender women, are at the highest risk for violence. And that's not some set of, that's not just some circumstantial thing, right? It reflects back to us the way that our society operates. So for me, I think the thing that would allow us to eventually ever close the center, which is a certain paradigm in nonprofit anyway, but Zane and I talk about the fact that we would love for the center not to exist because people were able to get good jobs and good apartments and good health care. We would like to not be needed in our society. And I think the only way we're going to do that is to address these deep inequities, because the trans communities just reflect that stuff back to our society as a whole. It just shows us who we are. When we look at the trans people who are suffering the most, it reflects the people who are suffering the most.
Preach. Thank you so much for that clarity, that the big picture and the acuteness of the day-to-day challenges. They're not just challenges, but I like that you specifically said systemic social change. It's not something we can talk about just in New Mexico or just in a conversation today. It's an ongoing, working, critical work. Thank you. Tara, I'd love for you to follow up on more conversation with us.
Yeah, that really said it all, Adrien. You really hit the nail on the head. It really comes down to all those inequities, and it's deep and it's systemic, and we do have to face it from that intersectional lens. Looking at our participants, we see that they are most affected are trans women, and then people of color, Indigenous, and Black especially. Those are the most affected across the board, but we all do have issues, and I'd like to see healthcare in particular, but all of the institutions that we're a part of, to deeply change their structure and to root out that systemic racism and inequity and transphobia and misogyny, and I can keep going with all of those terms, but that's really the issue. And until we do that, we're going to have these same problems over and over, because it's deep and it's part of society. And we can make small changes, and there's a lot of symbolic changes that are happening, like painting Black Lives Matter on a street. It might feel good, but that doesn't change the racial inequity. We need to make actual, real changes. And that's for every sector in society that's affected. But we need to start, I believe, with racial injustice, because that's the most violent, the most horrible thing that we're seeing right now. And it's been a part of this country since before we were a country. So this isn't something new that's just being exposed, like Adrien said. This is something that activists have been yelling from the rooftops for years and years, and slowly we're starting to listen, but we should have not just listened, we should have made action, and that should have happened right away. And it's okay that it's not happening right away, but we need to do it now. Like we screwed up, we didn't listen right away every time, but we need to start doing that. We need to start listening, and to stop having these long committees to figure things out, and to stop having so many, listening to this other side that's telling us not to do it. We just need to do these things and make these changes. And I think once we start doing that, we will see these things go away. Because I don't want my participants to have to come to me every time when they need to fill out unemployment or something. They should just feel comfortable going and talking to any person about that. And I don't want people to have to come to me for every question they have about STIs. They should be able to go to their doctor or to any clinic and get the same healthcare and the same compassionate, non-judgmental care that they're going to get from me anywhere. And unfortunately, that just isn't the case. And that's, I think, in healthcare especially, that needs to change.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Tara. Especially since you're, day to day, even if you have a good funding and a good partner through the Department of Health, everything can be done better. Everything can be addressed, and there are ways to maybe share the learned experience and the positive things that are coming out of that partnership, and so many things. So thank you for that. And Dani, I'd love for you to continue with this.
Yes, thank you for those answers. They were amazing and so accurate. And really, our goal is to work until our jobs are not needed anymore. And historically, we have seen so many things fail, such as healthcare, government assistance, all these things. And Tara, you're right. Like, seeing right after her clients coming to me and applying for unemployment because they can't even understand how to start, and there's so many barriers. Some of them haven't even seen that unemployment check, and they applied in March and April, or a stimulus check, or some clients are undocumented and aren't even eligible for those assistance. There's so many people like slipping through the cracks that it's just like hard to watch because there's no assistance to even get them back up. And that's really why we started the campaigns, because there was nothing else. We were just standing there watching them not be able to pay for food, not be able to pay for rent, and applying for things and being denied, or just not even aware that things were around them. So I don't even know what else to say, because I can go on and on about this forever. This is what we do every day. But I think you guys said it beautifully.
Thank you, Dani. We do appreciate all of your additions for sure. And if any of you have more ideas about this, you feel free to type into the chat resources or connections about the work that you're doing to further any one of those concepts around racial injustice and inequities in the health system and whatnot. So I'm going to send it over to Robert to wrap it up for our hour and ask our last question of our panelists. And thank you all very much.
Awesome. Yeah, we're actually going to close down. We might be on time. All right. Our last question is what we always ask of our participants is what can our community do for your organizations today? How can people help from home? What are some creative ways that people can help y'all? We'll just start with Adrien again, if you could help close us out.
I mean, I'm an ED at a nonprofit, so I can't miss the opportunity to say we need money. We always need money. If people want to donate to us, it's very easy to do that on our website, which is tgrcnm.org, our Facebook. But we'd also be excited for you to join our mailing list, which you can do from either our website or our Facebook page, and keep up to date on what we're doing here at TGRC. I mean, a lot of folks get excited to plug in around the legislative session and help us when we need folks to show up at committee. And we always send that stuff out on our email list. So if you want to know what we're doing and become involved in what we're doing, or have an opportunity to boost the signal of what we're doing or participate in it, I would say get on our mailing list, follow us on social. That's going to be the best way to just see what we're engaged in and see if it's something that you want to get involved in too. I mean, we're hoping to, eventually be able to go back to doing in-person events and things, social events, fundraising events. But for right now, I think we all just have to use the tools we have online to connect the best we can. Like Terra, we're doing all of our support groups on Zoom right now. And, it's been a really interesting learning experience that some folks actually participate better on Zoom. And it's been another really big learning. I'm a person who has disabilities myself, but I still think sometimes I have areas where I'm not aware about accessibility and not thinking well about all the different kinds of ways that people might need accommodations. And so we have found that there may be a call to do some Zoom stuff and some in-person stuff when those things are both possible, instead of just being like, well, screw Zoom, let's stop doing that. There may be reasons to keep doing that to try to involve as many people as we possibly can. So I would say donate to the thrift store if you're a person who has If you're Marie Kondoing your garage right now, we'll definitely take your stuff. If you're a thrift shopper, please shop at the thrift store. That's a huge help to us. It helps our whole community. It helps our programs. Those are probably the biggest things for us right now.
Thanks, Adrien. Terra, help us close this out.
Yeah, I think more important than just donating to my organization, even though we're great, is giving back to our community. And that starts with, like I mentioned, mutual aid earlier, TGRC, Casa are great organizations, any of the other mutual aid relief funds that are happening, especially for the reservations and Pueblo areas. I think we really just need to give back to the most affected people by this right now. If you want to help my organization, you can get the word out in a couple different ways. You can share what we're doing with Teen Empower. If you have any LGBTQ youth or allies that are 13 to 18, they can totally join our chats. You can share our Adult Empower stuff and help adult LGBTQ people get in touch with each other and community. And you can let people know about our HIV testing and our PrEP programs, which we have walk-in every day, Monday through Thursday, noon to 8. And just really get that word out there. And that will help break stigma too. Letting people know that you can get tested, but also letting people know that you're not judging them for whatever happened, why they need to get tested. And part of that comes with COVID, like I mentioned earlier. Like, people are still hooking up. So we have to make sure that they have access to sexual health and reproductive health services.
Awesome. Thanks, Terra. Last but not least, Dani, help us close out.
Yeah, so our website is casaq.org, so you can go there to donate, of course, and all that good stuff. But I think specifically spreading the word is the most important thing. We do have beds open, so if you know any young person, LGBTQ or ally that is homeless or at risk of homelessness, we are 14 to 17-year-olds. You can call that number that I shared earlier for more information. I am also happy to email flyers if somebody needs flyers or drop them off anywhere. And yeah, just spreading the word is really the most important thing for us. And also donating to our aftercare campaign. The residents are okay. The aftercares are really struggling. They're out in the world, and the world is not a happy place for them right now. So we are hoping to get a second apartment soon to help any aftercare that is homeless currently, or just rent assistance. So that is going to them. We are also doing a weekly $40 Smith gift card that helps with, not only food, but laundry detergent, toothbrush, soap, shampoo, all that good stuff that nobody thinks about. And yeah, again, casaq.org. And that number you can call for more information is posted in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Dani. That's pretty much it for Impact and Coffee. I would just want a big, huge thank you to all of our panelists today for all of your great work in our community and for this really great discussion this morning. I know I learned a lot. I will say that if you have Facebook pages, feel free to share on our ABQ Impactors Facebook group for Impact and Coffee. We'll gladly share that with our community and make sure to broadcast that as loudly and proudly as possible. Also, big thanks to all of our audience today for joining us on this first Impact and Coffee of July. I cannot believe it's July already. August is just right around the corner. And just know that Impact and Coffee will be back next Tuesday. Mariah, could you talk a little bit about who's on our panel for next Tuesday before we get going?
Sure. Yeah. Next week is youth and outdoor opportunities, and so we're going to be talking about a couple of different organizations that are pivoting from some outdoor groups to other opportunities. And we're going to have Girl Scouts of New Mexico Trails, the Santa Fe Mountain Center, Wild Friends, and Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. So that's going to be really interesting. Also, I appreciate that you said that we do have the Facebook Impactors page, so anybody can post there, and if you're not a member, you can request a membership. And that's also, Facebook is one of the places that we will post this recording, along with some of the resources. So follow up for that. I think that's about all I wanted to add, and thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mariah. And with that, we wish everyone to have a really great week, a really great Tuesday. Thanks so much for joining us for Impact Coffee. We'll see you next Tuesday. And may all your lights be green. Thanks, y'all.